Good morning in Denver, Colorado. Well, Brad Smith, you're in Pueblo, Dr. Brad Smith, a couple hours away from me south, where it never gets cold or snow, just like up here this winter. Anyway, it doesn't seem like it. My guest this morning is Dr. Brad Smith. I was trying to think of how many years, like we've known each other a long time, like, I don't know, 10 years, maybe longer. Anyway, I met Brad through the Crankset group. We are in something called 3 to 5 Clubs, which is an opportunity for business owners to be in community working on their business, not in their business, so that they're able to scale their business in such a way to have freedom and more significance and make more money in less time. And Brad has done that. In fact, he's reached what we call his ideal lifestyle, where he has lots of flexibility, except for one thing he just started, which we'll talk about in a minute. So, Brad, I'm so glad that you're here. I love what you're doing. I'm just going to let you tell the audience like who you are and how. So, just so you know, Brad is in the area of sleep and functional medicine. You guys know this is some of my favorite topics are functional medicine and everything that goes with it. And in fact, a few years ago, I said, Brad, you need to be in functional medicine. Finally, he got in functional medicine. Anyway, so Brad, tell us about you, your family. Like, how did you decide you were going to get into this profession?
I've always liked science, and from an early age, I initially wanted to be a veterinarian. And being a vet, you have to learn about all the animals, and I was just smart enough to learn about one of them. So,
and you have to be outside a lot.
Yeah, and it's dangerous. Large animal vet it's somewhat dangerous, but
yeah, people don't kick you or bite you very often, right?
Yeah, I haven't got kicked in a long time. So, but. Started, my primary specialty was in family practice. My undergraduate degree was in human nutrition. So always have liked the functional medicine side of things, and then got into family practice, and then, had a mentor that introduced me to sleep medicine. And that was great because so often in family practice, you're just kind of fixing the symptom and not actually fixing the underlying issue. And in sleep medicine, you can actually fix a problem, which I really like. And functional medicine, you can also fix a root cause of problems. And in both of those, it deals with that underlying core issue. Instead of just, here's a problem, here's a pill, which so much of medicine has become. So I've been doing this since 2009 and have had this practice in 2011, and then opened up one in North Colorado Springs last year, and branching out into the functional medicine side. So that's been exciting. And just building the team, that's the hesitation I've had. And one of the things that Crankset has taught me is hire slow. So we really are looking for good culture fits for the company. And that's we've had somewhat of a challenge finding that.
How long have you been doing this? Like, when did you start?
Started in 2009 in sleep medicine, and then 2005 family practice, and did that for a few years. Did a fellowship and got going into sleep. And then in 2022, after your urging and other people's urging, did the functional medicine training. So, and that was interesting stuff. It's still kind of the Wild West out there with functional medicine. There's really evidence-based good stuff, and there's some more fluffy stuff on the exterior that may not be all that evidence-based. So that's been the challenge with that compared to traditional medicine, is because traditional medicine is so cut and dried, double-blind, placebo-controlled trials, and you know exactly the data behind the medicine you're using, whereas in functional medicine, there's just not that much objective data on, does this actually work and will it work for you? So, but that's also the fun part about it.
Does a functional medicine doctor have to be an MD?
They don't. A large portion of them are NDs.
Explain the difference, would you, in terms of an MD and a naturopath? I don't think a lot of people understand the difference.
MD is a medical doctor, and they go through 4 years of medical school and then residency, which is usually 3 or 4 years. So they have 7 years of after getting their bachelor's degree. So usually get out around 30 years old, start practicing. Naturopaths is a shorter course, and it's mainly focused on holistic care. But they're still they still get a doctorate degree, but it's not as much hospital-based stuff. It's not procedural based. It's mainly based on naturopathic medicine. And then there's also in this field a lot of chiropractors that are in it as well, because it's a lot of that whole body approach that chiropractors use. And I'm actually a DO, which is a doctor of osteopathic medicine, and we are trained also kind of as a merge between MDs and chiropractors. So, manipulative therapy and how to adjust the spine and extremities. Yeah, there's a lot of varieties in providers. There's also quite a few mid-levels, nurse practitioners and physician assistants that have gotten trained in functional medicine and are providing that. So there's not a real formal certification. It's not like I'm a certified person and there's not a formal test with a board certification. So the training and experience people have is kind of hard for consumers to understand.
Yeah. And I'm not saying I want to be clear. I'm not making any negative comment around naturopaths or physician assistants or chiropractors, because I think the people that I've run into that have those that focus, they're very experienced. They're very experienced in other ways. Like, one of the people that's treating my daughter worked for a nerve and pain clinic for a long time. And that's especially helpful with Lyme because of how it affects the brain and the nerve. In fact, the reason she got into it, I'd love to have her on the podcast, she told me, is because people weren't getting well, like they weren't getting help. They were still in pain. And that led her, down that road with tick-borne and infectious disease. So I think certainly if you're out there looking for somebody, look at what they've done, not just the education they've had, but look at what other experience they have. And, I think that medical background is certainly really valuable. And I love that you're doing other things because, like you said, traditional medicine's pretty cut and dried. In fact, I was listening to a podcast from a woman who has been a doctor for a long time, and she's an attorney. And she was really frustrated in medical school because even though she knew somebody needed a CAT scan or an MRI, they had to do the x-rays first. Mm-hmm. It didn't matter. Like, they had to do them. And so there's all these protocols of like, can't just skip right there. You got to, And so she was really frustrated. And she's still a doctor, but she became an attorney too. So anyway, I digress. But I think that's fascinating, just the whole way that people are educated and trained and then actually function, in real life. And I love that you have that whole body approach with being a DO as well. So tell us about sleep. Like, I don't think a lot of people, I didn't know, I still don't know, certainly as much as you or others know about, like, why is a sleep doctor necessary? Like, why can't I just go to my regular doctor and talk about sleep? So tell me about sleep. And we know how important it is, but tell me about sleep and what do you see happening and what can we do?
So mainly what we do is we deal with problems with either being too tired or not tired enough, which we call insomnia, which you're just not tired and can't sleep, or hypersomnia, where you feel sleepy all the time. And underlying issue in a lot of this, especially in the people we deal with, is first and foremost sleep apnea.
And what is that exactly? What is sleep apnea? It's not just snoring. It's not just snoring, right? No,
there's two forms of sleep apnea. The more common one is obstructive sleep apnea, which is an increase in what we term upper airway collapsibility. All the muscles we have in the upper airway let us talk and swallow, and they're very what we call compliant. The tissues around there are compliant because we have to move that airway a lot in order to do what we do. And when we go to sleep, so do those muscles, and just that little bit of pressure when you breathe in is enough to cause that airway to narrow down, which is causes snoring, or collapse all the way, which causes an obstructive apnea. And we term that in mild, moderate, severe. Less than 5 events an hour we consider normal, and just snoring is normal. between 5 and 15 is mild, between 15 and 30 is moderate, and over 30 events an hour is severe. And we judge that with a decrease in breathing intensity along with a drop in oxygen levels. And we use a 4% decrease in the oxygen levels, which would consider it an event. There's also at this altitude and your altitude, a condition called central sleep apnea or high altitude periodic breathing, where you don't have the drive from either low oxygen or high carbon dioxide to breathe. And that's more common here because in order to get enough oxygen, you have to breathe more, which blows off or releases enough carbon dioxide. You don't have either drive to breathe at night, so you have a pause in breathing. It happens at this altitude for some people, and it happens to everybody at a higher altitude. Everybody climbing Mount Everest has it, or if you go up to Pikes Peak and want to sleep up there for the night, you'd have it.
Just walking up there is like, oh my gosh, like I have to walk slow. Because what's Pikes Peak elevation?
14
something, yeah. Is it more like I might pause in my breathing or almost like hold my breath and gasp? Is that how to tell if maybe I'm having sleep apnea, not just regular snoring? Or
yeah, most of the time people get turned in by their spouse or sleeping partner.
I didn't want to say that. But.
Yeah, we get that. And then surprisingly this year, a lot of people had the smartwatch
yes.
for Christmas. So we had a ton of people come in and they said, well, my watch thinks I have sleep apnea.
And do they?
Most of the time, yeah. The watches are pretty good about detecting that.
And don't they have a ring also that monitors now your
They do.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, like my sister has one of those and she'll tell me and I'm like, after a while, do you just want to turn that off? Like, do you want to have that information all the time? But certainly, it makes a difference. So why, we know sleep's important. We know we heal during sleep, but what's another reason or what are some other reasons we should take sleep really seriously?
It will actually make you live longer. If you get quality sleep, it decreases the risk for heart attack, stroke, dementia. They've done some newer functional PET scan and functional MRI scanning. When people sleep, it actually causes the brain to actually shrink and what they call glial washing, where the cerebral spinal fluid essentially just kind of cleanses the brain of all the protein and waste products. And that occurs at night. So if you don't have that deep sleep, then you don't have that restorative process for the brain. You have, people call it brain fog, or I feel hungover in the morning or I have a headache in the morning. And that's because your brain needs that time to slow down and regenerate.
Why does it impact weight or weight loss or weight gain so profoundly, like not having enough sleep or having, I don't know, maybe too much sleep? You tell me. It
has a effect in a couple different ways. One is when you're not sleeping, you don't have as much energy, so you're not as active. And metabolically, you also have a few effects. You have a decrease in leptin and an increase in ghrelin, which are two intestinal neuropeptides that cause you to be more hungry and not to feel satisfied when you do eat. And that also increases your desire for sugar and not healthy foods. And then secondly is cortisol. Every time you have those events of sleep apnea, you have a release in cortisol, and that increased cortisol level leads to that buildup of centripetal obesity. Traditionally, that's been a really positive effect on the human race because, 500 years ago when we had an increased cortisol level, it was usually because we were starving or someone was chasing us. So our ancestors that lived through that were able, at times of that increased cortisol, to be able to retain and store fat and live through the famine. Now it's a maladaptive response.
Yeah, most of us aren't fleeing some animal chasing us or starving to death, right? Unless we're doing intermittent fasting or something like that. I think it's really interesting that when you're tired, you want, just a big light bulb goes off for me is like, when I'm really tired, I just want to eat like ice cream or cookies or, like I want to eat stuff that I typically don't have any craving for. I might think about it, maybe have a bite of something, but really I manage my nutrition now and medicine and everything else so that I don't really have cravings for things, which is wonderful. But when I'm tired, I will often go, I'm going to eat like 5 chocolate chip cookies, not a bite. So that's interesting that we might want to look at that, right? Like, why am I having this craving? Oh, I'm not getting a lot of sleep. I've been staying up a lot, or I've been getting up a lot, or, something else, is affecting that, not just the hunger, not just the out of control craving. So good thing to look at. At what point do you think everybody ought to look at monitoring their sleep? I mean, is that something you would do?
I don't recommend that you sleep know or your partner knows if you're having issues with it. So ask your partner, say, hey, how am I sleeping at night? Because you're sleeping and most of the time you don't know unless you record yourself or
you have a watch or
you have a watcher. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. The other day, Tom said, you don't usually make any noise, but the other day it was like you were growling and gasping. And I said, I've been so dry. It's been so dry this year, right? We've not had moisture. And so, having a humidifier and all that stuff. But even with that, I've just noticed I'll get up and I'm I'm so thirsty, or my mouth is so dry, almost to the point where I can't talk until I have something moisturizing. Are you finding that this year, especially here with us not having any rain or really any snow? We're really in a drought in Colorado.
We are. Yeah. And it leads to, periodic apnea, not breathing or sleeping well. So if you're congested, then it takes more pressure to breathe in because you have to go through the congestion. And that even leads to more collapsibility and fragmentation. And, you just wake up not feeling rested and feeling like yourself.
So if somebody feels like this might be really important to their health, do they go through their regular doctor to find you? Can they just call you directly? How does that work?
With most insurances, they can just call directly. However, we have most of our referrals from their primary care because most patients have a really good relationship with their doc, and they come in and say, hey, I'm not sleeping well, or I feel fatigued. And we work closely with them because the workup for that is also metabolic as well. So you want to check things like testosterone and thyroid and look for anemia and look for low iron and vitamin D. And so you want to do some vitamin blood testing in conjunction with that. So we work really closely with primary care doctors to help line out, why am I not feeling well? And that's a tricky thing with medicine. Sometimes it can be more than one thing. It could be sleep apnea, it could be low iron, it could be low vitamin D, and it could also be gut issue with gluten sensitivity or a food allergy, which causes you to have an increased inflammatory response. So that's where it kind of gets tricky, but also gets fun to try to unravel that and figure out what is actually the mystery.
Do you see a lot of children?
We do. We see mainly the kids that we see have just big tonsils and need their tonsils taken out. Sleep apnea affects kids in a much more significant way at a lower level than adults. So we use a criteria of 1 or 1.5 events an hour to have sleep apnea in children, where it's 5 an hour for adults. And we use a 3% desaturation criteria compared to a 4% desaturation criteria for adults, because those levels at a very mild extent can really cause neurocognitive delays, as well as when kids get tired, they get ADHD. So we see a lot of kids that have been essentially misdiagnosed with ADHD that actually have sleep apnea. So interesting. One of the things that the pediatricians have done a really good job at is if somebody has behavioral disorders or possibly ADHD, is to check to see how they're sleeping and how they're doing. A lot of times it's just undiagnosed sleep apnea that gets correct and their ADHD goes away.
That's amazing. So tell me what it's like to come in and have a sleep study.
So we are a longitudinal testing facility. So we do the testing, but we also see people before and after to both order the right type of test and other testing if needed, as well as to explain the testing. There's a lot of other sleep facilities just do the testing. And you can go online and get a sleep test and do it. And then they send you a report. And then what do you do with it? So you that's where we come in, is we're like, well, this is what you have. These are your different treatment options. And then we'll help you along the way get better. So initially we see people in for a consultation, order usually a sleep study, sometimes some laboratory work. Most of the time we do a home-based sleep study just because it's a lot cheaper and a lot faster. And it's also mandated by insurance. It's not nearly as sensitive or specific. It's not as good a test as their in-lab study, but it definitely can let you know, do you have sleep apnea or not?
Is that like wearing a monitor of some sort?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We have two different ones. One just monitors airflow with a nasal cannula and effort belt that monitors chest wall effort, and then a pulse oximeter. And then we have a newer one, which is called the Sleep Image Ring. That's from a company up in Denver. And they have had just almost like the Oura Ring, but it's a bigger watch, kind of looks like a Super Bowl ring. And you put that on and it monitors for sleep apnea as well. So that's been helpful for people because it's just so easy to use.
And for you listening, pulse ox is oxygen, right? It's monitoring the level of oxygen. In fact, when I broke all those 9 bones, left side of my body, and was having physical therapy, one of the things they were always having me do is blood pressure and pulse ox, because they wanted to know, because I wasn't as active, right? And so sitting around can create its own issues with, I got COVID during that too. Like Tom went to urgent care because he didn't feel good and brought COVID home to me. Right. While I'm recovering. So, we have our own blood pressure and pulse ox that we check on a regular basis. They're so inexpensive to get, so I think like even if somebody's thinking about it, they could even get some of those things and test themselves, first and see how am I doing in those areas of like, what's my blood pressure like and what's my oxygen level like? And I found that there's things you can do to increase that oxygen, like, deep breathing exercises and some of those things that we just take for granted, So I came to your team, worked with your team, coached your team a little bit, and got to see your facility. And I was like, oh, wow, I'd sleep overnight here because it looks so comfortable, like a beautiful guest room. So when you do have someone come in and do a study, like how long is that? Tell me what that's like so somebody would know how to think about that.
For those studies, we have people come in at around 8 o'clock at night, and we have a sleep technician that briefs them and walks them in and brings in things, and essentially just sleep in pajamas, and we hook up some monitoring equipment, which is better than it used to be, but still a lot of stuff on you. So there's 6 electrodes that go on your head, 3 on each side. You have 2 on your eyes to watch for eye movements. You have one that monitors chin movements. You have a little microphone that goes here to monitor for snoring. You have a belt that goes around your chest and abdomen. You have some electrodes that monitor your heart rate, like what you do when you're in the hospital, and also monitor leg movements. So it's a lot of little stickies on you, but we monitor.
Yeah, I wondered, how do you actually sleep with all that stuff on you?
Usually the people we see are so sleepy that they can sleep anywhere. Okay. But once they're on, you don't really feel them because they're super small. They're about the size of the tip of this pin, and they're very light. They're kind of sticky, but usually once they're on, you don't really notice it. Much easier for people like me without hair. And that's usually the biggest complaint we have is the electrode gel gets in the hair, but you can wash that out easily with shampoo because it's water-based. Yeah, we monitor more stuff than you do during surgery or when you're in the ICU.
Wow.
Monitor sleep stages and movement. And so it's a very precise and sensitive test to say, why aren't you sleeping? So, most of the time it's sleep apnea, but it can be other stuff too.
So let's say I come in and I do a test and I have some kind of moderate form of sleep apnea versus, I mean, you could talk about moderate and severe. Like what would you do, to help me with that?
Usually our first line is PAP therapy, or positive airway pressure therapy, which is the traditional masked and machine to produce positive pressure, which equalizes the negative pressure breathing in. So it essentially acts as an air splint to keep the airway open. That's usually our first line because we can do that quickly and it's the lowest cost. For lower, mild to moderate events, you can also do an oral appliance, which is a dental appliance, which is essentially a upper and lower retainer, and it has a hinge that keeps your jaw forward and from falling back. Those are the two main things that people use. There's some newer treatments like the Inspire, which is a hypoglossal nerve stimulator, which is an implantable device. So it's like a pacemaker, and it has a wire that goes to the hypoglossal nerve, which is the nerve that stimulates your tongue. So it senses when you breathe in, and it stimulates electrically your tongue. So your tongue sticks out a bit and opens the airway in some people. So that's a new novel therapy. We have a few people doing it, but a lot of people, for good reason, it's implantable, it's invasive, and it's expensive. So it's really limiting on that. And then for central sleep apnea, there's a new device called Remedy, which actually stimulates a diaphragm. So if you don't have the central desire to breathe, then this causes your diaphragm to contract at night. So we have a lot more options than when I started doing this. When I started, it was just CPAP.
I know for me, I've lost almost 85 pounds. That has made a really big difference in my sleep. I think snoring every night, probably may still have some apnea, but boy, has that made a difference to take that weight off. And everything else, but that's a big piece. So when you said it's not just usually one thing, it could be, like you said, your thyroid, or some other metabolic thing, or some other blood, something you find in the blood work that, you've got to treat as well, to be able to get optimal sleep. But it's interesting. You said you could live longer because watching, I think it's called Longevity Hackers. I don't know if you've watched that movie. I think Tony Robbins put it out, and it's on Amazon. It's fascinating about the longevity of, health, our health, and what we can do about it, and that we're not really meant to die, which is an interesting concept, right? And so, there's a spiritual implication to that, right? But then there's also a scientific, piece, and looking at, just even simple things that we can do, not to just extend our life, but the quality of life. Like, I think I don't want to live a long time if I don't have a great quality of life, but I certainly want to live a long time and have a great quality of life and be able to function. So no time like the present.